Yeah, I was like, well, and if I remember, which is what I'm going to do. I didn't even stop my well, one right after. I'm like,
Let's take attendance. Everyone get out a piece of paper.
What was it? Oh yeah, that's the funny. That's the funny shirt. And I ain't sharing either. I don't share.
All right, so here is your attendance question for today. How do you define management?
Oh Lord.
How do you define management? Well, in your mind, what does management mean? This class is family resource management.
And you want us to take the whole series or the whole day to do this, right?
I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Being succinct is a skill.
That I do not have.
No, it's not. It's regular. Right. And what I would do is I would, just get it's a little hard. I looked over the feedback. It's gonna be a little hard. Yeah, it's totally fine. Because they had asked me. And then I forgot. Okay, I was like, we gotta be here. Because I don't log my book on this print and all of this goes away. So I don't remember it. I'm like, I wish. That's the way it's tired. All right, last call. Do we have them all? Okay, so a couple of reminders. Well, a reminder. I don't know if I have more than one. But this Thursday, what's happening? Quiz. Class is meeting online, y'all. So you're going to get online and you're going to take your quiz, and that's class for that day. So instead of making you come here and hand out paper and then making Shanae grade them all, we're doing it through Canvas. And I looked it over today. It's a little tough. You need to have read the book and been here. Otherwise, you're going to be like, oh my God, I don't know. Remember all the standards about like don't cheat. I told y'all where cheaters go. Did I tell you that yet? Shanae, where do cheaters go? To hell. Do you really want to go to hell for a quiz in FCS 301? I feel like if you're going to go to hell, it should be for something way better. So don't cheat. You are welcome to use your book. But I'll tell you, if you're trying to get through 25 questions in 75 minutes, by going through the book and reading it as you do it, you're never going to get all the answers. So make sure you've read the chapters, make sure you've gone over the lecture notes, and you've been here, and you should be just fine. I anticipate on Friday getting a lot of emails from people who are like, I forgot, or I did a really bad job, or something like that. Just remember, we drop your lowest quiz score. So if you totally blow this one, if you forget to take it, no big deal. You've got 4 more chances. But the flip side of that is if you do really well, that means later on in the semester, there's one quiz you don't have to do. I'll say this a million times, and I will still have some people take all 5 quizzes just because they're not paying attention. So if that's going to be you, that's going to be you. But y'all are here and listening. So how many quizzes do you get points for? 4. How many quizzes should you hopefully take? 4. But if you do really, really bad on one, then you can take all 5 of them. So just keep that in mind. I think that's something, again, that I'll say a million times and people always forget. But that's what's happening on Thursday. So if you're here in class that day, you're going to be lonely. Save yourself the gas and just stay home. The quiz will open at 12 a.m., 12:01 probably, and we'll close at 11:59. So you have all day Thursday to do it.
It says 5 a.m.
Well, we'll fix that. Sometimes I forget to tell Shanae what she's doing, so. Yeah, I mean, if you're up at 4:30 a.m. and you want to take it, you can. Hopefully you're not still up from the night before, because then you're probably going to have some other stuff going on. So it will be open all day. Take it before time ends. Don't start it at 11:30 at night. You may not finish. But that's what it is. It will be graded, and then you will know what to expect from future quizzes. Questions? Okay. If you do like, oh, my internet went out, or oh, whatever happened all of a sudden, immediately you need to contact ICT. You need to talk through with them what's happening, because they are the only proof you have that something broke. So if anything happens and you're unable to finish your quiz because of technological issues, you call ICT and make sure you get a ticket number. Because then when you tell me, oh, well, my internet went out, I couldn't do it, I can call ICT and they can say, yep, and this is what we talked about. So that's your only proof. If there's a technological problem, ICT will be your only proof that you did it. So make sure you have that number handy too. It's all over Canvas. It's just that help at nmsu.edu, and there's a number associated with that. So that's what's happening Thursday, and then we will meet again next Tuesday in class. We're rolling right along now, y'all. We're in chapter 3 today. We're gonna get as much of it done as we can, and then we're just gonna keep moving forward. You should be thinking about your assignments, you should be working on them. That outline's gonna be here before you know it, that bus assignment's gonna be due before you know it, because what happens is you're like, oh yeah, no, I'm totally gonna get that done. And then you forget, or you get busy, and then all of a sudden you're up the night before trying to get it done. So keep on top of it. Make sure you're looking at the syllabus that tells you what you gotta do. And if you have any questions about it, ask me or Shanae. Email during office hours, whatever. Yes.
In regards to the research, one,
Uh-huh.
do you want that in hard copy?
Nope.
Pardon?
No.
Online?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you want a cover sheet on it?
Nope.
Okay, no cover sheet.
Nope.
Just
Just the outline. Yeah.
the outline with references and all that?
Yep. Yes. Yes, everything in this class will be submitted through Canvas. I don't like wasting paper. I don't quite frankly like touching paper a whole lot. So everything's submitted online.
Oh, and going back to the last lecture, and you said in the lecture that time is linear.
Mhm.
Well, I remember, I forget where it, whether I heard it or read it or whatever, but somebody, it's time is three-dimensional.
Okay.
That it's, like, spheres that, intersect and everything like that. And
Sure.
the focal point right there in the middle, that is the present time
Okay.
and all that. And
Let's talk about that after class because we need to get through today's lecture
Okay.
today. But what you're talking about is physics, basically, and perception, and that is a super complicated thing. So I'm not an expert, but we can talk about it later. Okay? All right. So today we're talking about the management process. I asked you all to tell me in your attendance calendars how you define management. So let's see. Someone with their tabs. Crystal.
Oh, dang!
Oh my gosh.
It was an accident.
Get those tabs off of there, man. I can't stand those things. All right, so let's see what you put here. Prioritizing makes sense. Being in control of a situation. Control becomes important. Communicating. Something else I can't read. Keeping things in order. Thank you. Let's see, being organized and effective. Are all managers organized and effective? No. Should they be? Yes. Delegation, being able to efficiently delegate. Being consistent. Being in charge, being able to do something that you can handle. Getting everyone or everything in its place, okay? Sure, being accountable, I think that's important too. Someone's got to be the fall guy, right? Control, I've seen that a lot. Organizing. Identifying resources. Yeah, okay, so good. You guys have the basic gist. You've all heard of management before. Maybe you've been a manager. How many of you have ever had a position where you were managing, like formally where you get a paycheck for it versus like your house? A couple of you. How many of you have ever worked for a manager? Okay. And then, of course, what we're talking about more specifically is family management, which is a little different, but we got to understand management before we understand family management. So let's dive in here. It's ongoing. Just a couple of quick things to add to your definitions. Management is ongoing. I can't come in, manage everything, and then leave and never come back. Because what happens when the manager's not there? Nothing. Nothing happens. So it's an ongoing process. It's something that is continual. You can't ever be done managing if you're still the manager. It involves matching resources and needs. So if we have time, which I doubt we will, we'll watch that clip. But if not, just kind of thinking about how, like in our department, we have a new department head, and he's walking into like 25 faculty members who all want something. We got this pot of money, and we all think we should get it for our research, for our interests, that type of thing. So he has to decide who needs it most. How can we get people what they need? How can we make sure that everyone gets what they need, not what they want, because there's no way that would happen. We got no money. But really that's what we're thinking about. How do I don't have to do the jobs, but I need to make sure the people doing the jobs have the resources they need to be able to do them well. Business family management differ. We've talked about that already, but there are some similarities. So we're going to kind of be comparing business management to family management and seeing where some of those things intersect and where some of them are very different. We recognize and acknowledge that families exist within a dynamic environment. What does that mean? What is a dynamic environment?
It's always moving, it's changing, it's not stagnant.
Not stagnant, it's always moving and changing. Families are constantly changing. You know how you always think like, oh my gosh, once we get through this tournament this weekend, then things will go back to normal. That doesn't ever happen, because then there's something else that comes up that you have to get through. Once we get through the wedding, then everything will return to normal. Once we get through blah, blah, blah. So families exist in dynamic environments. So what works now may not work 6 months from now. Same type of thing. You have to constantly be ongoing in your management. Why do we study this? Because it's important, because it's essential to humans, because if we don't understand how to more effectively manage, we have a lot more stress than is necessary. We already have stressful lives, but if things aren't being managed appropriately, it's more stressful. So it's a way to try to limit that, save people's mental health, if you want to think about it like that. We know it's always been a part of all societies. We've always had to think about, how do we manage this? How does mom make sure everyone gets what they need? How does dad make sure that everyone's needs are met? How does dad make sure it's not only needs when it comes to families though, it's also emotional needs, right? It's not just here's 20 bucks, kid. It's like, hey, I'm gonna take off work early today so I can watch your program at school. So how do we do that? How do we figure that out? It's a huge field and not enough people have thought about it historically. We haven't looked at it in these terms. We've always said like business is separate, family is separate. And there are some separations, but there's also a whole lot of ways that they intersect with each other. So some of the parallel histories really quickly. There's all these different ways that business management was written about. There's management concepts such as, here's what FILE says. We need to plan, organize, lead, and control. Guess what? Families have to do that too. This field comes from home economics. That's why we are the home ec department in a lot of old people's minds, because they never really learned the difference. But that's where it came from. That's why home economics, which is now family studies, human development, has become a thing that you can major in. Because we realize like, oh yeah, this is important. And why don't we teach it? Why don't we inform people about family management? Because we may not all go into business, but we'll all in some way be in our family. So seeing those parallels, seeing the connections there, recognizing that, yeah, this matters. And we can learn from business, and business can learn from us. We can work together. A lot, if you don't know, the business professors make way more money than we do, like 3 times what we make. So they're a lot smarter than we are because they go into the higher paying fields. But you know how many of them come from fields like social psych, psychology, sociology, places like that? That's really a very popular thing in the business world, to have people who understand psychology, who understand the mind, who understand families and systems. Because when you understand that, you can apply it to business to make more money. And that's what business is all about, right? Maximizing profits. So there are a lot of connections and there are a lot of parallels. And they're good friends to have, definitely. Let's see here. Let's talk about these very quickly, the eras of businesses and families. And this is not obviously when this started. We've always managed families, business has always been around, but when it started to kind of really become identified, beginning in the 1900s. And I'm going to focus mostly on that right-hand column because that's the most interesting part, but as you read through the book, you saw these kind of connections and how they came together. But basically in the 1900s, we started studying households and trying to figure out, how can we get more of their money? How can we get them to spend more? How can we stimulate the economy? Because that's where all the financial decision making is coming from within the family. So we started with focus on health, sanitation, and hygiene in households. How can we understand how families use these things, the products that are related to them, that kind of thing, so that we can appeal to them? It's a little sneaky. Marketers, let me tell you, they're a little slimy sometimes because they're always thinking about, how can I make you think you need this product? And they are geniuses about it too. Don't get me wrong. I'm buying stuff on Facebook just because I'm like, yes, I need that in my life. Like I just ordered a magnet for all my knives yesterday because Facebook told me I needed it and they were right. I do need it. Like I'm gonna hang my knives on the wall now. So I'm in, I'm totally in. And the reason I'm in is because they know me. They see what I look at and they realize like, this girl's got some knives and she's got a kitchen. So let's connect the dots for her. Give her the link so she can just buy it. That's so very scientific, the way they do that. So we're all susceptible to it at some level. The only difference is I'm totally aware that they've got me. I'm not trying to act like I'm not. But they're really good at it. And they get that information by saying, okay, what are the things families need? Where do families want to spend their money? What are their investments? Are they wanting to go on lavish vacations? Or are they wanting to make their kitchen more efficient? Do they want their house to be prettier? That kind of stuff. So starting in, we said, okay, health, sanitation, hygiene, those are priorities. Those are basic needs of families. Let's figure out that kind of thing. And then, in addition to that, we created these high school and university programs talking about how do you prepare meals, how do you clean, how do you meal plan, how do you organize housework. Traditional home economics, the economics of the house, how to make it run more effectively. That's where we came from. That's where we started because we said, hey, people should know how to do this. To be fair, back then we said, hey, women should know how to do this. Fortunately, we've expanded since then, and now we're like, yeah, guys can learn it too, because everyone benefits from this. So that's where we started. You can read through Weber's bureaucratic system on your own. It is important, but again, we're kind of in a crunch today, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but there it is. Era 2, the 40s and 50s. So now we started more directly aligning business and home economics together. We are in this age where inventions are coming on like crazy. We're producing things. We've got better technology to produce things in mass quantities more quickly. So we're like, hey man, we have this huge boom going on. We got to get people to buy this stuff. We got to make sure that we're making our money. There's this notion kind of just overall in America, like things are good. We're in a time of prosperity. Like we're going to space. Like there's all these ideas and aspirations as a nation that we're looking at. So then we were like, we have all this cool stuff. How do we tell people about it? How do we get it out there so other people can see it? And that's where we have to, again, connect that to the family. This is after World War II. So we've got some young families. We've got soldiers returning home. We've got things going back to normal. So young families are created here. We have a whole new group to market to. People are in consumption mode. We've come off the Great Depression. We've come to a place of prosperity where we have a little money now. And we don't have rations and we don't have as much shortages as we used to. So we can start buying stuff. And buying is very addictive. We all like to buy stuff, right? Remember like when you're little and you're like, I got 10 bucks. I'm gonna go spend 10 bucks. That's the mentality sometimes with that consumption mode of like, hey, I've got money. I'm gonna spend it. I'm gonna get some stuff that I like. So we started asking families, like, what do you want? What would make your life easier? So that we can incorporate it into our modern homes. Have any of you ever been to Epcot in Disney? They have the whole like kitchen of the future and that kind of thing where you can walk around and look at what the kitchens today were supposed to look at. The Jetsons, you know, there's all these cool ideas about, oh, you're gonna have a robot that does your dishes. yeah, we actually have that now. Like, oh, you're gonna have a thing that cooks food super fast. We have that now. And that's where this stuff comes from. Like, we identify a problem. We're like, man, food takes forever to cook and it's super hot because the oven is hot and we don't have air conditioning. How can we make that better? Let's make a microwave. So we'll talk more specifically about some of those technologies, but that's what's happening here. We're focusing on how can things be more efficient? How can we use products to make our lives better? Because if a product doesn't make your life better, you're not gonna invest in it. You're not gonna buy it. You don't buy stuff that's not gonna help you, right? Well, okay, you shouldn't. We all do. We all buy crap, but that was not the focus then. It was like, hey, we've got money, we've got the motivation, let's combine this and let's figure it out. And then we move into the 50s and 60s, where we've got this kind of corporate culture going on. Corporations take over. We're all kind of familiar with the term of corporation, like y'all kind of understand what that means. It's like this, these people manage this. So they're the experts, they're the ones, you know, more specialized in their work. The workforce is still primarily male at this point. But I mean, you know, eventually we'll get there, give it another 50 years or so. But basically, that's what's happening in the business world. We've got this corporate culture. The people are putting on their ties and going to work 8 to 5. They're working for the man. They're, you know, hoping to earn their retirement and working in the same field for 30 years, which hardly ever happens anymore. At home, home ec is beginning to change to say like, hey, okay, we have accepted the idea of home ec, now let's make it better. Let's see what we really need. How can we meet the needs of, again, women, because women are the ones still providing for the household. Even if they're working, not many of them are, but even if they are working, they're still going home and taking care of the stuff at home. The women's movement is picking up speed and momentum. So we're starting to say like, huh, why do I have to cook dinner? Why can't you cook dinner? Maybe you can wash the dishes. So that whole women's lib movement is starting to happen where we're like, maybe the way we've traditionally seen women doesn't have to be the way we do it from here on. So we're starting to change that. We're starting to look at things differently. And we're starting to see this movement into family resource management so that it's beyond how do you clean your house efficiently and how do you cook really good meals. It's also like, how does your family establish and support your values? So it's not enough just to have a clean house, but maybe you should be happy too. Setting goals. How do we make decisions? How does the family make decisions? Who gets to make those decisions? How do we organize and optimize our resources? So again, just kind of looking at context. This was the 1960s. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, okay, it was 60 years ago, but it wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things, and that's where we were. How many of you had grandparents, grandmas, who worked outside the home? What about great-grandmas? Very few. So contextually think about that. Like, it wasn't that long ago. All right, questions, comments? All right, moving on to era 4, the 70s and 80s. There's a lot going on in the 70s and 80s. Politically, there was a lot going on. Worldwide, there was a lot going on. But what we're really seeing start to develop is this Cantor's humanistic approach to management. So it's really not just enough to clock in, do your job, and clock out. We're also starting to think about employee satisfaction. What are the hierarchies and inside of those corporations? How can we make people feel more committed to their jobs, more committed to the corporation they work for, as opposed to just that's who you work for and that's it. So that's all happening in the office. And at home, there's a lot of budget crisis going on. I mean, we're heading into a recession in the later 80s, so we're starting to say like, oh, man, we gotta really be careful. We had this huge period of spending and this huge, like, we wanna buy everything and let's get all this cool stuff that's super expensive. Back in the day, microwaves were not 40 bucks like they are now. So as we're starting to do all this kind of stuff, we're starting to say, whoa, we need to maybe step back a little bit because we're running out of money. How do we navigate that? What do we do about that? So as the nation's budget gets really tricky and challenging, it impacts the families too. So it's that whole, you know, what happens up here affects down here and vice versa. We do start to provide emphasis on job training, saying like, hey, we need to make sure people are prepared for the jobs that are coming about because technology is becoming bigger. So we need people who can work in the technology field. This was before cell phones. This was around the era when the first computers were really being developed. Home computers were later though, in the late 80s. But in general, you know, systems, those huge computers that filled up rooms are being built at this time. So we're starting to really emphasize vocation and say we got to train people for the jobs that are coming. And also that's when the Perkins Grant came out, which is, if you don't know, a really good way to get free money for college if you qualify. So we started to realize like, hey, we've got like, you know, we have this mentality of we're the greatest nation in the world. How are we gonna put our money where our mouth is and foster that greatness? How are we going to help prepare our, you know, young adults and children to be able to carry that forward so that there's sustainability here? Because all cultures can crash. All countries can fail. So we started really kind of thinking about, what does that look like? And then of course, right in around the 80s, we start, you know, Reagan's elected in 79, he takes office in 80. And so we return to family values. We've gotten too far from the center. We've let those women out of the kitchen long enough. So we really politically started to see kind of a push back to a more conservative nation, to wanting to return to some of these family values, mostly because we're afraid and we're just not quite sure how to manage it. How do you handle all these women? You got to figure that out. Let's just get back. Let's just dial that back. So there's those competing interests of that, where on the one hand, we're like, yes, we want to make families more efficient. More women need to work now because of this recession, because this stuff happening economically, but we're not quite sure how to handle it yet. And then we kind of move into more contemporary movements. So the past 30, 40 years, where we're really seeing a lot of things happening on both sides of the house. On the business side, we're looking to be more efficient with our technology. So this plays out when you think about something like an iPhone. iPhones came out in 2007, I want to say. Barely 12 years ago, right? New ones are coming out today. Back in the day, it took a lot of money to produce those iPhones compared to now. Still not as much as they charge for them. But back in the day, we were saying like, hey, we have this really cool technology. How do we get it into more hands? How do we make the batteries last a little bit longer? How do we make the phone smaller? Cell phones used to be huge, and then they got super, super tiny, and then they got huge again. So trying to figure out how do we efficiently develop this technology so that more people can afford to buy it. But at the same time, how do we get them to pay $1,000 for it? How do we convince them that this is a worthwhile way to invest 2 months' salary, maybe 4 months' salary, depends on how much you get paid. But as the efficiency with which we create technology goes up, theoretically, prices go down because it costs us to make things. So that's kind of what we were thinking, but what's actually happened is then we've decided like, hey, we can make this for way cheaper, so now we can profit more on it. It's kind of a backwards approach, but hey, it works really good for the shareholders. So technology's boomed. Like since the 80s and on, it has boomed. How many of you have ever seen or been inside a Radio Shack in your life? That used to be like the coolest thing ever. They had all these fun electronics and stuff like that. They're all gone now. But every single thing that was sold at Radio Shack is now available right here in my phone. Everything, and better quality. So that's how much technology has changed. You guys have all seen Radio Shacks. You've been exposed to them. They haven't been gone for that long, but they're completely obsolete now. Because you don't need to get a video recorder. You can record on your phone. You don't need a VCR. You can stream from your phone to your TV. You don't even really need a TV, you know, but they're nice. So all of these things, as we're seeing this happen, that's why technology is such a risky thing to invest in. Because it's amazing in some ways, but so many ways. But once the new thing comes along, VCRs used to be like 800 bucks when they came out. And you had to choose between a VHS or a Betamax.
Yes.
The people who chose Betamaxes, that lasted a couple years, and then they went out. So if you invested all your money in Betamax, you lost. If you got a VCR, you were going to be okay. Same thing happened back when I was in middle school. We had these things called laser discs that were going to be the new videos. But then they competed with DVDs, and DVDs won. These days, streaming online music is such a thing that CDs aren't even selling anymore. I remember CDs used to cost 20 bucks. I would get 20 bucks for Christmas. We'd go to Hastings and I'd pick out a new CD and then listen to those 11 or 12 songs, and that's all I had. And that was so cool. And it was so much better than cassette tapes because I didn't have to rewind. But now you can get CDs for $1 at Walmart because no one's buying them anymore. Same thing with DVDs. Used to buy a bunch of DVDs. I love watching movies. But you know how much of a pain in the ass it is to have to get the movie out of the case, go put it in the DVD player, turn it on, make sure the amp's working. So much easier just to get on Netflix and watch a movie. So in just a very short time, technology has gotten so much better. And it affects families all the time because we have to decide, like, am I gonna buy a ton of DVDs? Or am I just gonna say, like, no, I'm not gonna do that because I can, for the price of one DVD, I could pay for Netflix or steal someone else's Netflix account and not have to worry about it. So that's where business is kind of looking at now, like, how do we do this? Because we went all in on DVDs. That's our thing. We made them great. The quality is amazing. Everyone loves DVDs until Netflix comes along. And Netflix actually still mails DVDs. That was how they started out. Like, you got online, you picked your DVDs, they mailed them to you, you watched them, and you mailed them back. They still do that, but very rarely because we've moved on. So as consumers move on, technology tells us basically where we're going. Has been a movement to avoid the depersonalization of employees so that we recognize that people don't just come to work and perform their job and have nothing else going on in their life. You know, these factory workers, people who are just kind of like cogs in a machine, like you can take this person out and plug this person in and nothing changes. There's been a movement to try to change that within corporations, to change that within the business world, to recognize individuals because happier employees perform better. That's why Google has such a good thing going, because they treat their employees really well, and the employees in return feel loyal to the company. And then, of course, with this work-life balance, we'll talk a lot about that. We finally started realizing, like, family impacts work quality. So that's why we have to do things like provide some sort of family picnic once a year where the families can come all together and we'll buy them food and we'll have something like that, because we want families to support the person's work. If the person's working and not home a lot, but the family's able to say, like, hey, but we know that they're getting a lot of money, we know there's a lot of things the company's providing for us, they have greater loyalty. Companies need loyalty from their employees. So in addition to that, those corporate incentive programs have come along where we do try to, again, provide things. You know, we give you, maybe you get a car, so you don't, you know, you can drive a nice car. Maybe we send you, you know, there's companies here in Las Cruces that take all their employees on a week-long trip to like Hawaii or on a cruise or something like that. Because we got to this place where we're like, okay, we got to do more. Corporations have to keep their employees happy. And if the employee's family's not happy, the employee's not happy, because you all know that rule, right? So if you're not happy at home, you're not happy at work, and vice versa. Home Ec has been a really good resource for corporations in this area, family studies, being able to say, like,
Here is what families need. Here is how families can optimize themselves. Here's how you can give them a job that they can do really successfully, because you're also providing these resources for them at home. Simple things like letting you take your laptop home. Sometimes that's a huge thing. Companies are like, nope, can't use your laptop for personal things. Okay, there's a reason they do that. But if they're like, yeah, here, have an iPad, take it home, let your kids play with it, there's that greater satisfaction and there's that greater loyalty. So family, home ec traditionally, and now family studies, has been able to help shift that and help corporations understand. They have consultants who come in, they hire people like us to come in and say, like, how do we keep employee morale up? And it very much starts with how are you treating them, and what is their work life doing to their home life? Sometimes you really, really, really love your job, but it really sucks for the people at home because they never see you, or because you're always tired, or someone's always calling you, or whatever. So figuring out how do we balance that? How do we manage that is what we have the opportunity to teach. So what do you guys think? Thinking about technology, I'm pro technology, I'm a fan. I drank the Kool-Aid and I buy all the new stuff. Is that good or bad as far as management? What are the ways that technology helps the management process? And what are the ways that it gets in the way of the management process? So kind of get in small groups and talk about that for 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll come back together. So how does technology impact management? Take another minute.
Well, I mean, we could
All right, let's come back together. So let's start with the ways that technology interferes with management. Let's hear 3 ways that it interferes. How does technology get in the way?
Less verbal communication.
Less verbal communication? Why is that a problem?
Well, because there's a lot of things that you get out of conversation that you don't get written down, or things may be taken wrong.
Okay.
I think it's good to have a little bit of both.
Okay. So yeah, if we become too reliant on sending emails, texting, things like that, which is written form of communication, we may miss some context clues. People tend to be a lot braver behind a computer. So they may be meaner or nastier because they feel safer with that thing. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. You all get emails every day, right? Like tons of them. That can be stressful as opposed to like, hey, that you could have totally just walked into my office and that didn't need to be an email. Okay, so that's one way. What else? Yep.
It's very distracting.
Distracting. Tell me more.
And you can really rather watching
Sure, absolutely. It's a huge distraction. You know how many of y'all are on your phones right now? I see it. It's a huge distraction because it's always there and it's always kind of like, okay. Yeah, someone's at my house. Who's at my house? Did my package get here? Like, yeah, I wonder what's going on in the, whatever. Because it is like always there. And we always have to choose whether or not we're going to kind of give into it. Managers hate that. Employers hate that. Teachers don't love it, FYI. But it is distracting because then it's causing you to choose. Whereas before, that wasn't available all the time, right? If you wanted to do that, you would need to go home and check your answering machine if you wanted to hear what people were calling to tell you or whatever. But now it's always there, and we tend to prioritize it over other things. And it's totally by design. That's what they want. They want you connected to that phone. They want you to feel panicked when you forget your phone. Because that is, yeah. Everybody would probably rather watch Netflix than do homework. I mean, that's pretty universal too, right? Again, it's a lot easier than it used to be to watch movies. You used to have to actually get the thing out, and like, it was a mess. And now you don't. So I agree. I think there are a lot of distractions that come from it. One more. What's another way that, yes?
It can be easily
How so?
well, when your whole life is literally on your phone, it's way easier for someone to get into your phone, get all your information.
Sure.
Ads target you now, and people sell your data, and that didn't happen a while ago.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a risk, an inherent risk that we're always having to fight. And it isn't just with cell phones. That used to be, I don't know if y'all, again, man, I'm feeling super old now. I was alive during Y2K. How many of you know what that is? All right, so Y2K, it's like a history class. Back when we were gonna switch from 1999 to 2000, the new millennium. People were freaking out because they were saying, hey, when computers were invented, they were only invented to go up to this binary, blah, 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 all this stuff, like, y'all are gonna lose everything. All of our banking's online, all of our cash registers are online, our gas pumps. Everyone freaked out and stockpiled food and water because they were afraid that the utilities were gonna go down. They pulled money out of banks and like stuffed it under their mattress. Like, it was a huge thing because we were like, oh my God, if our technology fails, we are done for. Like, we could cripple a nation from that. Like, if you can't put gas in your car, what are you gonna do? You can't even drive somewhere. So absolutely, it can be compromised not only from like malicious things, but sometimes it just goes down. You've all dealt with that. I'm right in the middle of a quiz and my power blinks and I lose it. or my internet goes out, or whatever. Like, that's a problem. So yes, becoming too dependent on technology keeps us from being able to live without it. And technology is dependent on resources, so good. What are some ways that it improves management? 3 ways that it improves.
You have the ability now to find things that you couldn't find before and price shop.
Sure.
A lot better now.
Absolutely. Much more competitive market
Yes.
because you don't just have to go get what they have at the store. You can look online and find something better.
International.
Also,
The internet, I have people that I deal with in different countries, several different countries, because we have technology,
Yep.
Zoom, WhatsApp, whatever, and we're able to do video calls and YouTubes and whatever to sell our product and to have meetings and brainstorm.
Absolutely. There's this international scope. Yeah, when I moved to the Netherlands, cell phones were out, but not like, it was like, you paid $30 a month and you had 30 minutes a month. So I had to get calling cards, little phone cards, and go stand at a payphone and call family back home. We moved home, and then when my mom went back to Germany, all of a sudden it was like, oh, we could Skype. And that's free. As long as you have Wi-Fi, that's free. She's not really good at driving. She gets lost all the time. And when we first lived in the Netherlands, we had a map. So I had to sit there and navigate. Okay, turn left. You're going to have to take this exit, blah, blah, blah. And then GPS came along, and it was like, holy cow. Man, she'll tell you what to do. She'll tell you where to turn. And if you listen to her, you'll get where you need to go. So absolutely, internationally, we've seen greater resources to where we can connect with a global market. We can connect with people across the world. This is super helpful for military families. This is helpful for people studying in other countries in a lot of ways, and most importantly for business, right? Because now I don't just have to sell in Las Cruces. I can send Hatch chili to Italy, and guess what? They're buying it. So I think that's definitely a way that technology has impacted us. One more way that technology has helped management, helped things get easier to do. Yeah.
Things like Google Calendar for families is really helpful. Know where everybody's at, especially when it gets crazy.
Absolutely, yeah. So just organization, things like Google Calendar. For families that share custody, there are family management apps where everything's on there, so that the parent who doesn't have the child that week still knows what's going on. Absolutely. So organizing families, making it a lot easier than just having that calendar on the fridge that if you don't look at that calendar, you don't know what's happening. It's all with us now. Good. So we can all agree there's trade-offs, but it's not going away. So I feel like we should embrace it. Some people are like, we're too dependent. Yeah, probably, but it's pretty amazing what it can do. So we have to reconcile that at some point, but not yet. All right, so let's do a little quick history of some of the major technological things that we use every day. In the 1900s, there were telephones back then. There were over 1 million of them. But you know how you used to have to do it? You had to, and an operator had to say, who are you calling? And had to plug your line into the other person's line. That's the olden days. And then in 1905, Staugher comes along, who's an undertaker, which is weird, but basically comes up with a switching system that allows you to dial numbers. So now the operator doesn't have to sit there, because if you're calling the operator and she's taking another call, you're waiting and waiting and waiting for her to unplug and replug. So now you can just pick up the phone and dial someone's number, which is pretty cool too. 1937, there's a built-in bell in the telephone so that it could actually ring. And then in 1967, telephones with push buttons and touch-tone dialing appeared. How many of you have used a rotary phone? Took forever to dial. So we're like, this is a problem,
Yeah.
let's fix
That's
it.
the problem.
And now you don't even have to push buttons. You just have to tell what's her name to call who you want to talk to. But I can't say her name,
Right,
she's
'cause
listening right now. She is. Every time I leave this class, I go in my office And the ads that are on my Amazon and Facebook and everything are what we talked about in here. So let's not fool ourselves. She's listening. But just in that short time, 67 years, phones made these huge advancements. And then, of course, today, forget it, you know. Refrigerators.
Who still has a landline?
Not many people. Landlines are a joke because they're way too expensive. They're gonna lose the market because they're charging us too much for them. Refrigerators, how many of you don't have a refrigerator? That's not even an option anymore. There are, you know, small apartments in New York. There are places that don't have refrigerators or don't have large refrigerators. In Europe, they're most definitely smaller. But almost everyone has some way to keep their food cold. In the 1900s, that was a box with ice in it. That's why they called it an ice box. That's why my dad still calls it an ice box. Because it was a box, you put the ice deliverer put ice in it for you and it kept your stuff cool. So you had to really decide what you wanted to keep cool and what you didn't. In 31, we found Freon. You know Freon, it runs our refrigerators, it runs our air conditioners in our cars. So Midgley Jr. said, hey, there's this new thing. Maybe it's gonna kill the ozone, but we're not gonna talk about that right now. This is going to allow you to keep refrigerators cool without ice, without having to have that ice delivered and then worry about it melting and that kind of thing. And then in 1955, we started to make more energy efficient refrigerators. And we started changing the chemicals in them because we did realize that we were killing the earth, and at some point we can't do that anymore. So really just refrigerators went from very, very primitive basic things to now, like, again, everywhere. I have a little cooler that I can plug into my car and it's basically a refrigerator. It's pretty awesome if you're going camping. You don't have to go without when you're camping, and who wants to do that? So we've seen technology in this area change. This affects families. If you have a refrigerator, you don't have to go to the stores often because your food's not spoiling as quickly. So you do have the opportunity to not shop every day, although it's actually better for you if you do probably, but still it's changed things. It's allowed us this whole new world. It's allowed us access to healthier foods technically because we can store those healthier foods longer in a refrigerator because healthier foods tend to mold first, right? And they don't have all the preservatives in them. So this has changed everything about family life. Microwaves, one of the biggest. How many of you don't have a microwave? Everyone's got a microwave now. I had for a while where my microwave died. I lasted like 3 days. I was like, well, maybe I don't need one. Then I had to make popcorn on the stovetop, and I was like, yeah, microwave. 1965, these guys came out, and they were giant, and they were like, they're so much better now. But they were also super expensive, so we had microwaves. But it wasn't until the 80s when people actually started buying them. And a lot of this came from pushback of people like, you know, fast food, it's not the same. If you can make a TV dinner, like you're getting a bunch of junk instead of cooking up a nice, healthy home-cooked meal. So there was a lot of pushback about them. It took a while, but once people realized how amazing they were, there's not a kitchen, very, very few kitchens in the world that don't have one now. Not the world, in America, but also worldwide, there are a lot of microwaves being used. Sales took off through the 80s because they just got better. The technology got better, so we wanted them more. And as the technology improved, prices went down. So now, most people have microwaves and use them all the time. And you don't really realize how much you use it until you don't have one. And then you're like, holy cow, this is gonna take forever. Have you ever tried to reheat something in the oven? It's such a pain in the ass. All right, and the last one, Tupperware. How many of you own at least one piece of Tupperware? You got to, right? How else are you gonna keep your food fresh? How many of you have ever been to a Tupperware party? That's still a thing, y'all, man. Tupperware is making a mint. That stuff is crazy expensive. But it became a thing in 1945. They became available in retail stores. But we didn't trust them. We're like, no, that's plastic. Glass, that's the way. And then we said, okay, so people aren't going to the stores and buying these. How can we still get this plastic into people's hands? So that's when Tupperware parties came along. We're gonna go to your house and we're gonna show you how cool Tupperware is, and then we're gonna pressure you into buying it on the spot. And you're gonna, because you can't go to a party and not buy something. So that's really when that took off. Before that it was, and now what are we doing? We're swinging back the other way. Glass bottles. We're glass take-home containers, wood take-home containers, because we're trying to get away from plastic because we realized, yeah, maybe we got a little carried away with that. You see in the oceans, like there's a lot of plastic in there, and it's not plastic's fault. It's our fault for not throwing away our stuff like we're supposed to, but now we got to fix this problem. But this was, again, revolutionary, because now I can make enough food on Sunday to last the whole week. A lot of you guys probably meal prep. That's a big thing right now. You make shit tons of food, and then you put it in little containers, and that way every day you just grab your container out. All thanks to Tupperware. As opposed to every day I gotta go home and make a fresh meal. Now I don't. Mind blowing, changed everything. So what do you think? Yeah, we can do this. It's a spin-off of the other question, so we won't take a lot of time with it, but specifically within families, what is one way that technology has improved family life? And specifically within the context of families, and what is a way that it gets in the way of family life? What do you think? Just not, we don't have to do small groups, but just what do you think? Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say the microwave would be an example of both, kind of, because it does save a lot of time, and it's great for leftovers. But as you said, it's also very easy to put convenience foods and things like that in it, and not get the healthy meal, and not have the time to teach in my case, my kids to cook.
Sure.
There's balance in there.
Okay. There's balance in everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the microwave is very helpful and very convenient, but we don't want it to supplant the other. Because honestly, have you ever made a quesadilla in the microwave? They're gross. You gotta put it in the pan so you get the nice crunchiness to it, right? You can't, some things you can't give up. So yeah, maybe there's that. Maybe there is the trade-off of we don't want to just rely on that because we also want to have that other experience. One more. It's another way that technology has helped or hurt families.
Netflix killed Blockbuster.
Netflix killed Blockbuster.
We used to go to Blockbuster as a family.
Right.
It was an outing. You would go get the movies. The kids would try out all the new games and everything. It was a family affair. Everybody picked their thing. Now everybody's in all their own rooms, binge watch it on Netflix.
Okay, sure. Blockbuster was a thing. You would stop by Blockbuster, you'd pick out a movie, maybe you get some popcorn and drinks while you're there. Dairy Queen was right next door, which was super convenient. But yeah, sometimes because technology is so readily accessible, we don't have to work for it.
Right.
And we lose that kind of like if you don't want to watch, when we had to pick out movies, we had to pick like 2 movies.
Right.
And that's what you were watching.
Right, as a family.
As a family. And now if you don't want to watch what I watch, go in your room and watch something then. Or put your headphones in and watch it on your iPad. So it can get in the way of family time. It doesn't have to, but it very much can. Good. All right, let's keep rolling here. Trying to decide. Let's go to this. Decision-making process. So this is how decisions are made. The first thing you gotta do is identify a need. If there's no need, there's no decision to be made. So someone says, hey, I need $40 for football sign up. Okay, here's our need, $40. Identify alternatives to fulfill that identified needs. Okay, do you have to have that $40 today? Can you fundraise to earn that $40? Maybe you could ask grandma if she'll give you $40. So let's think of the different alternatives out there that can get us the $40 that don't necessarily mean me just writing a check. Step 3,
Okay, these are the alternatives. Let's identify them. What would happen if you fundraised for it? Well, it would take longer. Maybe I'll have to go out and, sell something door to door. Maybe I'm selling chocolate bars or something like that. Those are the evaluations of the alternatives. Then I need to pick one. So based on all that information, here's my need. Here are the ways I can get that need filled. Here are the good and bad things about each of those ways. Now I gotta pick one. You know what? I'm just gonna write a check because I don't wanna have to mess with it. Here's your money. And then afterwards I think, okay, so the next time $40 is needed, am I gonna do the same thing or something different? It's a very simple process. And most of the time we go through it without thinking of the different steps. It's just like, oh, hey, I need note cards for school. All right, well, let's pick up some note cards on the way home. But it gets complicated, right? Because this kid needs $40 for football sign up. This kid needs $20 because they have a field trip coming up. And I need to pay the electric bill. And maybe I want to buy some shoes or something, who knows? So that's when it gets complicated with families, because it's not just as simple, here's what I need, here's how I decide. Here's what I need, and here's what I need, and here's what you need, and here's what you need. So now we got to break it down even more and decide, unless we have unlimited resources, how do we decide what we do? Does it mean maybe you're not playing football? Then you're going to be pissed at me and give me ugly looks because I didn't let you play football and ruined your dreams of being an NFL star. Like, do I want to deal with that, or is it easier just to give you the money? Or do I say, you know what, I'll just do without. I don't need new shoes. Like that hole I can stitch up or something. So this is the basic process, but it gets so much more complicated because we have competing needs. But again, generally, this is what you do. What do I need? How can I get it? The different ways I can get it, which of the one is going to be the best for me? I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to think about it so that next time, maybe it's a little easier to make a decision. This gets tricky, and we'll talk about that a lot, but I want you to start thinking about the decisions you make every day. Like right now, I'm hungry. I have class at 12, so I'm only going to have about 15 minutes to figure out what I'm going to do for food. So guess what? I'm door dashing it. Then I get on DoorDash, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe I want a chicken fried rice because it's really good. I'm going to pay $10 for the rice, and then when we're all said and done, I'm in another 10 for delivery and tip and stuff like that. So I'm going to pay $20 for lunch today, y'all. That's so stupid. I should just run and pick something up. But I'm not gonna, because I don't have time. And the fact that I'm hungry makes me less likely to evaluate my choices and just be like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna pay the $20 for rice, which is dumb, because it's the easiest thing for me right now, and it's gonna meet my needs. I don't have time to sit through and evaluate, well, what else could I get? Because that's what you do, right? You get on DoorDash and you're like, oh, I could get that. Well, or I could get, like, you really try to make these tough decisions about what you're gonna eat, and that's one of the toughest decisions in life for me. And then I have to decide, am I gonna spend the money to get the food I want that's convenient, or should I just run downstairs and get something here because it's cheaper and whatever? So decision making we're doing all the time, every day. Think about the decisions you're making. You've got to decide if you're going to eat today, what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat. That's always a decision to make, right? It's food. You got to decide, am I going to go to my next class? Am I going to do my homework? And am I going to read the book? Am I going to swing by and see that person I said I'd swing by and see? Like, you're constantly making decisions. And so often you're not going through this process in like a clear, like thought out way. It just becomes second nature. That's okay. Little decisions, that's okay. But when we get to the bigger decisions, that's really where we come in to help families too. Let's figure this out. Let's kind of make a plan for how we're gonna make this decision so that it is a little bit more structured and fair versus like, you can't have $40 because I don't wanna give you $40. Not a great reason, but if you're a parent, it's totally allowed. So let's see here. The rest of this, y'all can manage to read on your own. Time management is important. It's something that we are doing. It's not just money we have to manage, it's our time. It's who's gonna go watch you, who's gonna take you to piano, who's gonna do all these things you have to do.
How do we run the time of family meetings? How do we plan the family as far as when we're having kids, if we're having kids, how many kids we're gonna have, all this kind of stuff. That's something that has to be considered too. How do we care for them once we have them? How do we decide on dependent care? That's huge. It takes a lot of time. It's super expensive if you go to a daycare or something like that. But if you don't work, you can't pay the bills. So that's another one. And then of course, financial management is part of it. So I use financial management a lot because it's a pretty easy example, but there is a lot more to it than that. And we break that down throughout the rest of the semester. Questions, comments. If you ask them now, everyone's gonna hate you. But for real, if you have a question, ask it. What's happening on Thursday?
Quiz.
Quiz. Where are you taking your quiz? Wherever you want, not here. I'll see you guys next Tuesday. Have a good weekend. Get out to the football game. Support the team, guys.